Today I'm going to make the press handstand training as simple as possible. Now there are some prerequisites here. You need to have some sort of handstand and you need to have some sort of flexibility. We can adjust some drills around to use the wall a little bit more or use freestanding a little bit more depending on where you are with your handstand. And we can bend the knees and make a few adjustments if your flexibility is not great, but obviously you want to be working on those things, that straddle flexibility, so this position becomes easier. And ideally you're working towards a handstand that you can just jump into and catch all the time, but that is not a necessity to work the press handstand. I'm literally just going to use 2 drills today. We're going to go through the eccentric and partial range, but we're going to adjust them slightly depending on your level and just combine the 2 in one superset. So what is the eccentric or the negative? So basically you just start in a handstand and then we go down as slow as possible through the path of the press. Ideally there'll be no drop in or fall in, and then you finish with tippy toes kissing on the floor with still most of the weight in the hands and shoulders. Now if your balance isn't great or you're new to the eccentrics or the negatives, then we're going to start off against the wall and we're going to use the wall a lot. So we're literally going to lean on the wall as we do it. So we want to kick up to the wall, we want to turn the hands out so it's a little bit easier on the wrists. And then I'm just going to take my back to the wall. I'm still pushing, so we don't want to collapse into this void. I want to push into the wall, and then I'm going to go into my straddle position, slowly come down, so butt still against the wall. I'm going to push my low back into the wall as best I can, then mid back, and then upper back, and then kiss the toes to the floor. Now, most people, especially if their mobility isn't great, the wall is going to spit them out pretty early on, so this type of thing is going to happen. So as you come down, you'll have this, and then you'll fall on that last bit. So ways we can make that slightly easier is we can take the hands a bit further away. We just need to be careful of the wrists. And or we can bend the legs as we come down. So bending the legs is going to keep our weight into the wall a little bit more, and it's going to help to get that rounding of the back as you come down. So I'm going to do 1 good rep of my eccentric, and then I'm going to go into my partial range. Now with the partial range, we have a few options to make it easier or harder. If we start off with the easiest one from a range of motion point of view, so we use a pretty high box. So I place my feet up on the box, and then I'm only working for a partial range. So I try and lift the feet up, ideally catching in the freestanding handstand, and then coming back down, kissing the box again. So that would be the partial range that you're working in, from the toes from this height to the handstand. Now if we don't have a freestanding handstand, we could be doing that and have the boxes here and then go up to the wall. But ideally we'll be catching the freestanding. You could have someone spot you there. Again, if your flexibility is not great and you find that you're more into a pike position like this feels very heavy, you could bend the knees, and that helps you to get up. But what you'll notice there with the feet very high is there's not much happening to the spine and the hips are very high. So as quick as possible, we need to get these boxes lower so we get more rounding of the back. So I recommend you do 1 good eccentric, 1 good negative, and then I'll do 1 to 2 reps of your partial range. If you've got a freestanding handstand, I would only count the good reps where you catch the handstand at the top and then come back down and kiss the box. And the same with this one, only count the reps if you get good quality ones for you. Now next level up to make this a little bit harder but still use the wall is, instead of laying on the wall with the back, I'm going to kiss the wall bit by bit as I go down. So it's going to look a little bit more like this. So I'm in my freestanding handstand, or I might get my heels against the wall first. Then as I open to my straddle, only the butt touches. As I come down a little bit deeper and you get that round in, then it's low back, then it's mid back, then it's upper back, and again, kiss the floor. So there's less contact on the wall. So it's going to be slightly harder than the one before when we were leaning on the wall. So back to the partial range reps, but this time I've lowered the box. Now when we lower the box, we want to think of a path that we're going in through the press. If we're using the straddle press, as we come down, the legs change in terms of the distance they are apart. So we need to apply that to the boxes. If you've got wider boxes like that, it's not so important because you can play around with it. But if you're using something like a yoga block that has a smaller target, you need to make sure the distance is correct for the pathway of the straddle at the height you're at. But same idea, I want to bring the legs out to the side until the point they start to feel light, and then try and bring them up and around into the handstand. Make sure you reset the shoulder into your normal straight handstand position. Come back down, shoulders go forward slightly as the back rounds, kiss the box. Next level with the eccentric, I'm going to start in a freestanding handstand. I'm not going to touch the wall at all, so I'm going to open into my straddle position, legs nice and wide, slowly come down bit by bit, pushing the low back backwards, but it doesn't touch the wall, mid back, upper back, kiss the floor. So basically I'm doing the full eccentric as it should be freestanding, but I have the safety of the wall if I need it from a balance point of view. And then with the partial range, just keep going lower and lower until you get super close to the floor. Obviously that could take weeks, if not months, but as you get closer to the floor, you're getting closer to the real thing in terms of the pathway of the hip and the shoulders. So I need a little bit of shoulder forwards now, and that hip flexibility, mobility and control, finishing that straight handstand. And ideally I'll come back down with control for another eccentric, kissing the target, show control. You could even do repetitions of that. Now there is a very simple way of looking at the press handstand, 2 exercises to give you that press and 2 movements that you can modify for your level, but pay attention to needing a freestanding handstand, so make sure you're working on that and make sure you're working on this straddle flexibility here. So this one, if you look like this, your press is going to look very different. It doesn't mean you can't press, but instead of it looking like this, your press is going to look more like this. So just bear that in mind when you're choosing your pathways for your eccentric and your pathway through the partial range. Let me know if you have any questions. Check out my website, www.paultwyman.com.au, and I'll speak to you next time. Thanks, guys.